All righty. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our January edition of our Team Dean's List call. My name is Erin Fadden. I'm a project manager with First Tech Challenge. And so this call was put together for teams to ask questions about the Dean's List Award. So this call, we don't have any formal training set up for you. Really, this is just a Q&A format. So there's a couple different ways you can ask questions. On the top of your screen, you should have a Q&A button where you can type in questions via the Q&A box, and those will come to us. We'll read them out loud and we'll answer your question. And the other option is you can raise your hand. We'll unmute you, and then you'll just need to unmute yourself, and you could ask your question out loud, and we can answer that out loud. So before we get started, Jill, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. So I'm Jill Wilker. I'm out of Northern California. And among many hats I wear, one of the hats I wear is that I am on the committee to choose the Dean's List winners. And I am very passionate about this award. It's one of my favorite things is to read all of the finalists. And so my goal with these calls is to help teams and coaches and mentors give great submissions so that my job becomes harder. Myself and the committee. But we want to, generally be a resource so that you can ask questions if there are things that are not clear. But we're here to answer away. So please ask. And I think everyone is anonymous, but if you will call on you by first name, if you raise your hand. So that's one method of asking questions. Otherwise, you can definitely type it in the Q&A. And if you have a very small screen, it may be under the more. I think
Oh, yeah.
call, they were saying they did not see the Q&A function. And so if your screen size is very small, it may be under the more ... You may have to select it that way. And if we don't have any questions, we can
Yep, like I said, no formal training. This is all about any questions that you may have about the Dean's List, about the just award in general, about nominating a student, anything you want to know. I will give the link in a second to the nomination guide. Oh, I'm going to put this in the Q&A. All right. All right. There we go. So just on the page over, so this is where you'll find some really high level information about the Dean's List Award. And then within that, under nominate your students today, there's a hyperlink for the Dean's List nomination guide. And so that is a step-by-step guide on what you need for the nomination, how to submit the nomination, et cetera, et cetera. What kind of questions are asked in the interview? Ooh, Jill, you want to take that one?
Well, so, based on the links that Erin gave in the nomination guide, there's actually, how to prepare for the interview and what to expect, right? So there are, basically some general high-level questions. In general, what the interviewers are trying to assess is they've read your essay and they're trying to map what you're telling them based on the criteria. And in particular, what they're asking is typically clarification or some more details around things that are in that essay. So, definitely you as the student want to be familiar with what's written about you, and you do get a copy of that once the deadline closes. So that's the first thing, is being familiar with what's written, make sure it's accurate. And if not, that's one of the things you should, be upfront with in your interview and saying, hey, it said X, but really it should have been Y. That's completely fine. People are human. But in general, what we're trying to assess based on the criteria is how well you fit that criteria. And so, become familiar with that, really shape your answers around what you personally have done. Unlike all of the other judging in FIRST, which is team-based, this is an individual award. And so we're really looking for what has the student done. So if the essay, for example, relays a lot about the team, is doing all these great things, they've done all this great outreach, they've, started at n number of teams. If I was an interview and I read all that, and I would be like, okay, but what have you as the individual, what have you contributed, what have you done, right? And so really look at it from that perspective. But there are hints in a list of questions of how to prep for your interview in the nomination guide. I'd also let you know that the interviewer guide is also on the volunteer resources page for First Tech Challenge. And so you can definitely read what the interviewers are getting taught as well, right? There's no mystery there.
We did have another question. Let's see. What do you think is the most important thing you should talk about during the interview? So kind of on the same vein.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the same thing, right? So much of it is, so if you're an amazing student, which so many of our first students are, and they have so many things they could talk about, if some aspect of what you've done in First Tech Challenge specifically is well documented in the essay, but you have all this other stuff that you've done, that may be an area that you could focus on all of the rest of the stuff. Like, you don't want to leave behind what you've done with your FTC team. But that's really what we're looking for is, what have you done to make your team successful? But if you've done all this other stuff as well, that's definitely, you want to feed that in. And it's a skill, right? It's a segue of, here's the question that I got asked. I'm going to answer that question and then lead the interviewer into an area that I want to, highlight some other aspects of what I've done, right? But you really want to put it in context of the criteria. So sometimes people get really hung up on all of the things they've done. Let's say they do food sorts every weekend. That is amazing. Like, major props for folks. But if you look at the criteria, it doesn't really quite fit. So trying to make sure that you're spending your time wisely, because the interviews are very, very short. And doing some mock interviews is a great thing, right? The interviewer guide is online. Asking like a student counselor, like a school counselor, hey, can you take this interview guide, do some mock interviews so that I can prepare for this? I think that would be amazing.
And the next question is, can you talk about things in your interview that aren't in your essay?
Absolutely. Yeah, you absolutely can. You want to be careful, right? As I mentioned, you want to make sure that what you're spending time on is directly related to the criteria, right? So the interviewer is trying to match you to how well you fit the criteria. And so you definitely don't want to spend, 8 minutes talking about all this really amazing, cool 3D printing that you've done of your interview. And it's really cool and it's great. And maybe you have all this really amazing stuff, but of the 5 or 6 levels of criteria, that's just one of the things, right? Which is passion for STEM. And so, definitely you want to come across as well balanced and not just focus in on one thing, even if that maybe is your passion. You want to get that passion across for sure, but you also want to make sure you feed in those other aspects.
Yeah, and just again, really, really important is that once the deadline passes, you will get the lead coach one, two, a parent if on file, and the student email if on file will all get a copy of the nomination essay. And the reason for that is to make sure that the student can read it ahead of time, know what's in the essay, and also know that if there are things that weren't included in the essay that really do line up very well with the criteria, absolutely they should be prepared to bring that into the interview. So that's a huge, huge, huge prep tool for the student, because when the interviewer is reading that essay before the interview, they're kind of formulating their questions based on what's there, right? But if there's something really amazing that that student wants to bring to the table that says, hey, this wasn't in my essay, but I want you to know this, and that can, start a conversation. So super, super important to use that to know what's there. And I did just put a link to the Dean's List volunteer guides. Those are on our website, as Jill mentioned, but the link is in the Q&A there. The next question is, how long are online interviews? How do we find out when the interview is? And is there a time frame for the interview day or schedule it?
Yeah, so the interview is, I think, a max of 10 minutes. Is that right?
Yes, 6 to 10 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, 6 to 10 minutes. We, for online in our region, we give a little bit of extra time just because of through Zoom, we put them into a room and there's just some back and forth and sort of settling time. So we end up giving a few extra little bits to get that back and forth. It may be in person, it may be online, depending on your region. You should hear from your program delivery partner in your region. So whoever is delivering First Tech Challenge, or somebody that's working on their behalf as sort of a coordinator. So like in my region, we'll have a person who is sort of the team coordinator that will reach out with probably like a doodle poll to say, okay, when are you available? And we give big buckets of time, right? Not, don't tell me which 10 minutes in the day that you're available, but are you available in the morning, in the early afternoon, the early evening, like that kind of thing. And then that coordinator then maps the interviews into a schedule. They should be, them or the partner should then be reaching out back to the student and the coach or the contacts that they have, to relay, like, is this in person? Is it online? If it's online, how do you join? All of the details of exactly when that will occur. So every region is a little bit different. So you really do need to hear from your local partner on the specifics, unfortunately.
And if you don't know who that is, I did just put a link into the chat, or into the Q&A, excuse me, local PDP or program delivery partner contact info. So if you click on that link, you can actually select your region and it will give the contact info for that person. So if you weren't sure, you can definitely reach out to them. I will say that, especially for regions, because a lot of regions are actually, the deadline is tonight. The clock is ticking.
It was a few minutes ago, actually. I think we're now just past deadline.
No, it's 9:14 p.m. Eastern. So
Oh, is
right
it?
now.
Okay.
So
So
yeah,
we have a little bit of time still. Okay.
a little bit of time left. But you won't hear anything probably for a couple of weeks out, because generally what needs to happen is that once the deadline passes, now the PDP can say, okay, I have either 5 nominations in my region or I have 65. And so they need to figure out, all right, I need to make sure I recruit enough volunteers to interview 65 students, right? And so they'll get all the volunteers in place, and then they'll start, reaching out and scheduling all those interviews. So it might take a little bit of time, but within the next few days, if you are someone whose deadline is tonight, you will probably receive the confirmation email no later than Friday. Usually there's a little bit of cleanup that has to happen to make sure that everyone is accounted for before those go out. So, and that is on me. What else? What other questions do we have?
Yeah. I think one of the things I will give advice for the team members is, you know, preparing, doing some mock interviews. It's okay to be nervous. It's okay to let your personality shine through. We're looking for that, right? So um, the interviewers are trying to put you at ease. I always try to start myself with what I call a softball question, right? Something that the student, like, hey, how's the season going, right? So something to spend 30 seconds on or so. I don't need a 5-minute answer. I'm looking just for a very short introduction, kind of to get the ball rolling. So you definitely don't want to get, long-winded answers. So that is a skill, right? To be able to answer succinctly, but like completely. And so having some practice is a good idea. If it is online, you will be asked to have effectively a silent observer, and that can be a parent, coach, a mentor. You, they don't have to be on screen, but if they're in the room, we do need to verify that they're in the room or that they have logged in a separate device and have a separate like Zoom session, for example. Um, so that's for use safety. So that is a requirement, but it's a really great opportunity where depending on who joins, if you could get a coach or a mentor who is really kind of that neutral party, who can kind of assess for you your body language. Did you have succinct answers? You know, how are you presenting yourself? And be able to give you some feedback, even though that may not be helpful for your Dean's List interview in the moment. It will carry you very far in job interviews and others to have that feedback. I think that's an amazing resource that you should not sort of underappreciate. I would love for someone when I was your age to be able to provide feedback on, you know, how am I presenting myself? Am I confident, or do I come across hesitant because my intonation is raising, all of those kinds of things, right? And so it is a fabulous opportunity and that you should take advantage of. I don't know, Erin, if you have any other little things. I think, I don't know if our YouTube videos are still online from
The only other thing I
prior.
was going to add to that was just was related to like individual contributions, right? So
Yeah.
making sure that the student it feels confident and comfortable to talk about their successes and the things that they're doing, because this is an individual award. So it's really, really important to drive that home, because I know that a lot of times, students are very, very used to the team judging aspects of First Tech
Yes.
Challenge.
The
And
we. Yeah.
yes, yes, and not the I. And this is an I award, right? This is
Yes.
talking about my, what I have accomplished. And so it is not selfish or boastful to for the student to talk about what they have done. That's what we want to hear. That's what the interviewers want to hear. So will we get confirmation on nomination submission as soon as the mentor submits online? How do we find out everything has been submitted before the deadline?
Yeah.
So when you save on the First Inspires dashboard, you will get on the top of your screen something that says successfully saved, and it is green. If you do not save, or
The
this is a
mentor
kind of,
or coach, whoever is submitting,
yes.
not the team member. I think this is a team member asking.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yes. So this is for the person who is entering the nomination, but I think it's important to say out loud, right? So,
Yeah.
when you enter each student, you need to make sure that you click save on each one and make sure you get that green successfully saved at the top of the screen. For the first nominee, move to the second nominee. Also, make sure you save everything, and you have to fill out um, every single spot on that nomination essay page in order for it to successfully save. If you don't complete that, if you don't even put some information in as a blah, 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 blah placeholder, you won't be able to save it and it won't stay there. So the way that you have to confirm is just basically logging into the dashboard and making sure, just checking on those nominations. As long as all the information is still populated, you're fine. The reason that we do that is we do want to make sure that if you have to enter some placeholder text, blah, 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 as you're, working through or collecting information, that you're able to do that and you're able to go back and you're able to edit it. And then once the deadline closes, that's the final version. So that's kind of why the system works the way that it does, and you don't actually get that confirmation until after the deadline closes. We want to keep that open for you to edit up until the deadline.
Yeah. And you, as a student member, would receive that roughly Friday.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, there is a bit of delay. It would be great is that if as soon as it's saved on the mentor side, that it at least gave you a notification of like,
sure.
hey, it was successfully saved. Hey, you're good to go, and wait for an email on Friday. But unfortunately, it's a leap of faith that they did everything correctly on your behalf. and you should get a copy of that nomination. What they submitted on Friday is the expectation.
Yeah. Like I said, unfortunately, this is something I'll have to keep thinking more on, is that there's some manual checks that need to go into place just to make sure everyone's accounted for.
There's a question about being on different teams
Yeah.
and their experience with FTC, and should they talk about experience from each team? So this is a tricky one because it just depends, right? You can absolutely pull nuggets out from each experience, and hopefully the essay is comprehensive of your entire first history and not just, let's say, if you've been 1 year with your current team, you don't want the essay to say, oh, they've only been involved with for 1 year, even though they have this other history, right? So you definitely want to help whoever's writing the essay kind of understand your full first background and everything that you've been able to do. But it is a tricky one because depends on sort of what you've done with those other teams. The coach or mentor may not be able to accurately reflect that in the essay. Right? They won't have sort of the context depending on the relationship between the teams, right? Or if there isn't any. So that's an area where being prepared in the interview to address that will be important, right? So, for example, you could bring props, right, to your interview. So you could have, a an endorsement letter from your other coaches, for example, and you wouldn't be able to submit that electronically, but you would be able to hold it up, particularly if it was not in, 10-point font, if it was in a bigger font, and or you could read a section of it out loud, right, and say, hey, although this probably wasn't reflected in my essay accurately, here's what my former coach would have relayed about my experience on that team and how I contributed, right? So it will really take a little bit more effort on your behalf to sort of weave the story and help the interviewer know, your whole first journey, but also with things that the person who's actually submitting it, which presumably is with your current team, right, that they are able to follow the story of the fact that there were 3 separate teams that you were involved with and really sort of helping pull that together. So it will take a little bit of sort of thinking through how best to relay that, but it absolutely is possible. But yeah, that one will be challenging a little bit. So definitely you want to think through what nuggets you want to say about each team or not, right? But I think it would be better to relay the full history of your experience with first. I think that would generally be a better response than to just sort of ignore that and only talk about your current team.
Yeah.
Particularly given that you've had 5 years with First Tech Challenge, right? That's a good amount of time for a sophomore or junior in high school. So that means you started very early. What else can we help with?
Give you guys a few more minutes, just see if we have any other questions, and if not, we can give people time back. I just know some people are typing, so okay, there we go. I think we got something else. Will all the mentors see the nomination as well, or will only the nominating mentor see the submission? So the one coach is the person who is entering the nomination, but the email will be sent out to both lead coach one. Sorry, the confirmation email will be sent to lead coach 1, lead coach 2, the student, as long as we have their email information on file as well as the student parent, as long as we have that information on file. But at very least, it goes to both coaches.
And if they have somebody else who has submitted, so that's in the case where one of the coaches that would have submitted normally is a parent, you can nominate somebody, they can invite somebody else to submit the Dean's List essay for the student. Would they also, I assume they would also get a copy. So both lead coach 1 and lead coach 2, but also if there's a Dean's List submitter that's different than them, they would also get a copy.
I don't think they do currently.
Okay.
I think that is probably something that we need to change, but it's not in the current workflow. So it's right now, it's just lead coach 1, 2, parent, and student.
Okay. So that's important. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
well documented in the nomination guide. We should make
Yeah.
sure it is.
And I think we just need to change it. There were some changes to the way that worked this year, so we'll have to
Yeah,
put that
it definitely would
into-
be better if the submitter,
Yeah.
if it was someone different than lead coach
Yeah.
1 or 2. So that's important. If lead coach 1 and 2 are your parents, they will not be able to submit on your behalf. They need to identify a non-relative to submit the essay and to write the essay. So definitely it's something you don't want to, particularly at this late hour, if your deadline is tonight.
And we'll give a few minutes, see if we have some more questions.
I'm trying to think if there are other nuggets of wisdom over the years that we can impart. I think if, in your region, depending on if it's online, what service they use, right? So if it's not one you're familiar with, most every online web conference has a free trial. So definitely you want to practice if it's something you're not familiar with, or at least dial in early. You don't want to sort of roll out of bed a minute before your interview, right? And try to connect to a service that you've never seen before, right? You want to make sure that if, for example, not all online services allow you to mute your background. Teams does, Zoom does, but not all of them do. So you want to make sure that if you are calling in from your home, for example, that you're in a location that is easy on the eyes, although we do ask interviewers to ignore what's in the background. You probably still want to, be responsible of what's being presented, through the camera. So whether that's getting a sheet or a bedspread or something to cover the background, right? I have a folding screen that I raise up. Otherwise, you'd see a very messy desk of my spouse behind me. And so I don't count on being able to blur or remove my background. I have additional lighting. So things like that, make sure that you're reflecting, as positive in a manner as you will, right? So treat it pretty seriously. But I don't see any new questions come in, so we definitely don't have to hang on if we don't have any more questions.
Yep. Give it maybe one more minute, and if we don't get anything else, then I think we can call it. Oh, yes, we got one more of a
Yep,
just a
we got
thank
one
you.
more. Yep. Just a thank you. Well, thank you for dialing in, and best of luck.
Yes.
Being here means that you are treating it seriously, that you want to learn and, present yourself well. So good job on that front.
Yeah, absolutely.
And mock
Jill, by the
interviews,
way,
although, Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, this is total, you're at 49 right now.
Oh, thanks. I like 49 better than 72, which is what we had last year. So
The
thank
night
you
is
for that.
young.
I know. Particularly out here in California. I'm sure people are typing away. Even though we've sent them like weekly reminders. The deadline, don't wait to the last day. Don't wait to the last day.
It always happens that way. All right. Well, thank you all for dialing in, and thank you so much, Jill, for assisting as our expert on the Dean's List topic. We appreciate it. And I just want to say to everyone who called in, best of luck. I hope you got some great pointers for your interview. Thank you for dialing in. Yeah, and just good luck this season. Thank you so much,
Yep.
and have a fantastic night.
Yep. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.